He never expected to find them there, alone, silent, forgotten. But that moment, that exact moment, would rewrite the rest of his life. Willow Creek was a small, sleepy town nestled between fog-covered mountains and aging pine trees. A place where time moved slowly and silence often spoke louder than words. On that particular afternoon, the sky hung low, heavy with clouds, threatening rain. The wind had that certain chill that curled under your collar, whispering that something wasn't right. David Monroe, 58, walked the same path he had walked for nearly 5 years. Every day, like clockwork. Past the rusted fence, over the cracked sidewalk, under the lamplight that never worked. A man of routine, quiet, tired, not in body, but in something deeper. He was a man people no longer noticed, the kind who disappears in plain sight. Once a school bus driver, once a husband, once a father-to-be. But the accident that took his wife and the unborn child she carried had also taken something from him that never quite came back purpose. And yet, something, call it habit, or maybe the last sliver of will, kept him walking through Willow Creek Park each day. That day, the park was almost empty. Only the wind moved rustling dry leaves across the asphalt, brushing swings that squeaked aimlessly. The storm hadn't started yet, but the air carried its promise, and that's when he saw them. At first, they were just shapes, small, still, sitting together on a bench near the edge of the playground, right under the old oak tree, whose branches clawed at the gray sky. 2 little girls, no adults in sight. David slowed, instinctively narrowing his eyes. Were they waiting for someone? Had a parent just stepped away? But the closer he walked, the more that uneasy silence pressed against his chest. They weren't moving, just sitting, shoulder to shoulder, staring forward, unmoving. Something wasn't right. One wore a red raincoat, unzipped, revealing a faded dress. The other had a denim jacket, 2 sizes too big. Both had tangled hair, damp from mist. Their shoes were soaked. Their hands, clasped tightly together, were trembling. And then he saw it. A small, worn-out backpack lying at their feet. Its zipper was open, revealing a folded piece of paper, crumpled, barely protected by a plastic sleeve. He looked around once more. Nothing. No parent, no car, no sign of movement. Just wind. Just fog. Just these 2 small girls, frozen in a moment they didn't choose. David approached slowly, unsure of what to say. As he neared, one of the girls, the one in the red coat, turned her head slightly. Her eyes met his. Wide, hollow. A child's eyes should never look that old. She didn't speak. He crouched slowly, not to startle them. "Hey there," he said softly. His voice cracked from disuse. "Are you okay? Are you waiting for someone?" No answer. The other girl, slightly smaller, clutched a small stuffed bear in her lap. Its ear was missing, and the fur was matted. Her grip on it was tight. David glanced down at the paper inside the backpack. Carefully, he pulled it out. It was a note, scrawled in shaky handwriting. "Please take care of them. I can't anymore. I'm sorry." No name. No explanation. Just silence and surrender. He felt a weight settle in his chest. Not shock, not anger. Something else, something between grief and urgency. He looked at them again, truly looked. And something shifted inside him. This wasn't part of the plan. He had no plan. But this moment was demanding something of him. Something he hadn't felt in years' choice. What would you do if you were him? David sat beside them on the bench carefully, leaving space, and just stayed quiet. He didn't ask more questions. He didn't reach out. He simply sat in the rain, feeling its slow descent soak into his jacket. Minutes passed, or hours. He couldn't tell. Eventually, the girl in red leaned into him just slightly. Her head touched his arm. Not fully, but enough to say I'm here, I see you. I don't know if I trust you, but I'm cold. The smaller one followed, resting her head on her sister's shoulder. No words. Just weight, just warmth, just a broken man and two forgotten girls sitting together on a splintered bench as the storm began to fall. And that was just the beginning. David Monroe wasn't a bad man. He wasn't weak either. But without a doubt, he was a man emptied. Before that moment on the park bench, before the two small girls with frightened eyes and clenched hands, David had already lost everything that once gave his life meaning. Not in a single devastating blow, but slowly, cruelly, in a series of silences, farewells, and things left untouched. 5 years earlier, he had been someone else entirely. A school bus driver in Willow Creek, known for his dry jokes and the silly stickers on his dashboard. Husband to Elena, the town librarian, with whom he shared early morning coffee, grocery lists scribbled on napkins, and quiet dreams that somehow felt like enough. And then there was the baby, a long-awaited child who never saw the world. It was supposed to be a weekend trip, just a short drive to the mountains to see the fall leaves. But a slick road, a speeding truck, and the sound of metal colliding with metal shattered far more than bones. David survived. Elena and the baby did not. Time lost its shape after that. He tried to continue. For a while, he still drove the bus, helped kids climb aboard, laughed at their stories, thought of how Alana would have loved the kid who talked too much. But little by little, color faded from everything. One morning, he just didn't go in. He didn't answer calls, didn't reply to messages. And nobody pushed too hard because deep down, they knew. David had left, even though his body remained. Silence settled in his home like dust. Elena's chair stayed in its place. Her clothes remained folded in the closet. The baby's crib, assembled but unused, sat in the corner of the nursery that never was. He never touched it. Not out of reverence, but because there was simply no point. His days became mechanical. Wake up, walk, sit in the same booth at the diner, order the same coffee, read the same newspaper headlines, never making it to the end. He watched the world through the window like a silent movie on repeat. He didn't feel pain. And maybe that was the worst part, because pain at least demands attention. But emptiness just waits. And so, when he saw the girls, he didn't feel hope. He didn't even feel pity. He felt something shift. That night, after dropping the girls at the sheriff's office, David went home as always. But the silence was different. He sat in his usual chair and stared into space, but the air around him seemed heavier. Alina's chair looked lonelier. The crib, somehow, colder. He sat on the couch, hands clasped, listening to the rain hitting the windows. And for the first time in years, a question rose inside him, quiet but persistent. What now? The next morning, he returned to the sheriff's office. An officer told him the girls had been placed into temporary care. We got their first names, Lily and Sophie. About 6, possibly abandoned by his stepmother, still piecing it together. David nodded, thanked him, and walked out. But his fingers gripped the steering wheel too tightly. He wasn't family. He wasn't stable. But something inside him refused to let go. That afternoon, he drove to the edge of town, to the motel where social services had temporarily set up. He didn't know what he planned to say. He just needed to be there. From the truck window, he saw them. 2 small figures sitting on the edge of a bed. One clutched the same teddy bear from the night before. The other stared at the floor. He stayed in the car, unmoving, watching. And then, as if pulled by some invisible thread, one of the girls, Lily, looked up. Their eyes met, no smile, no wave, just a connection. a thread between two quiet souls who had both lost too much. That night, David did something he hadn't done in years. He called his sister, Claire. They hadn't spoken in months. "Claire, I need a favor," he said. There was a pause. Then her voice, surprised but soft. "David, are you okay?" "No, but I think someone needs me." That call set a chain in motion. Paperwork, interviews, home visits, assessments. The system didn't make it easy. A single man, no recent job history, no parenting experience. The odds weren't in his favor, but David didn't flinch. He showed up, every time, with no excuses. Because for the first time in years, something mattered. He was allowed brief visits at first, then supervised time, then weekends. His house, once filled only with echoes, now held whispers and giggles. Lily lined up her crayons by color. Sophie made blanket forts out of couch cushions. The first pancake he made was burnt. He forgot to buy kid-sized toothbrushes. He didn't know bedtime stories anymore, but he learned. Slowly, awkwardly. And for the first time since Elena, he woke up with purpose. He, who hadn't finished a cup of coffee in 5 years, now woke early to make breakfast in fun shapes. He, who hadn't laughed aloud in longer than he could remember, now smiled at the sound of bare feet on tile. He, who had once disappeared inside his own silence, was being pulled back to life by 2 tiny hands. And yet, he knew the fight wasn't over. The system still needed convincing. They saw risk on paper. A man with a tragic past, no career, no clear plan. But what they didn't see was what the girls saw. The way Sophie left her teddy on David's chair before bed. The way Lily reached for his hand without thinking. The way the house no longer felt like a tomb, but like a home. No document could measure that. No form could capture what it meant when David whispered goodnight, and 2 little voices whispered it back. They were no longer visitors in his life. They were the reason it began again. The house had never felt so unfamiliar. David Monroe stood in the doorway of his modest living room, watching as 2 small girls sat silently on the edge of the old couch. The same couch where he had spent countless nights alone. Now it looked too big, or maybe they looked too small. They didn't speak. They didn't move. They just sat back straight, eyes down, hands close together, but not touching. It had been 24 hours since they arrived. 48 since he first found them on that park bench. And now they were in his home. He had cleaned the guest room, placed 2 small beds side by side, washed sheets, bought toothbrushes. He even set 2 stuffed animals on each pillow, found them in a dusty box from years ago. But when he showed them the room, they just stood in the doorway. Lily looked around, eyes scanning every corner like she was checking for exits. Sophie clutched her bear tightly and leaned into her sister. Neither stepped inside. He didn't push. He simply left the door open. They ended up falling asleep on the couch that night. Not lying down, sitting, side by side, shoes on, still holding hands. David covered them with a blanket and sat nearby in his old recliner, pretending to read, but really just listening. Their breathing was shallow, light, as if they didn't trust the air. By the second morning, the silence had a weight of its own. He made scrambled eggs and toast, left juice on the table, sat across from them and waited. Lily stared at her plate. Sophie glanced at her sister, then at David, then back to her lap. No one touched the food. He smiled, trying to soften the edges of the room. "I used to make breakfast for the school kids when we were running late. Best toast in the county." Lily didn't respond. Sophie blinked slowly. "Where's Monty?" she asked in a voice barely audible. David's heart twisted. He opened his mouth, but no words came. He didn't know what they had been told. didn't know what they knew, and he had no right to fill in that silence. "I don't know," he said gently, "but you're safe here. That's all I know for sure." Sophie looked away. Lily stood up and walked out of the room. That afternoon, Sophie spilled water in the hallway and froze. Literally froze, as if expecting punishment. David saw her eyes widen, her fingers tighten. "It's okay," he said quickly, kneeling beside her. "It's just water. Accidents happen." She didn't respond, just kept looking down at the puddle like it might swallow her. He grabbed a towel and wiped it up. "See? Gone. No big deal." Still, she didn't move for several minutes. That night, Sophie wet the bed. She didn't say a word, just curled into a ball, shaking. David found her like that in the early morning. Lily was awake, eyes open, staring at the ceiling. The sheets were damp, cold. He didn't speak. He just carried Sophie to the bathroom, wrapped her in a warm towel, and started the washer without saying a word. She didn't cry, but her bottom lip trembled as he gently dried her hair. By day 3, the air in the house felt heavy, like walking through fog that wouldn't lift. David was exhausted, not from lack of sleep, but from trying to understand 2 little girls who had built emotional walls thicker than his own. He watched them from the hallway, the way Lily flinched at every door that opened, how Sophie avoided mirrors, how neither would speak unless spoken to, and even then, barely. They didn't play. They didn't ask for anything. They didn't even argue. It was like they were trying not to exist. He called Claire that night. "I don't think I'm enough for this," he confessed. She listened, then said softly, "You don't have to be enough yet. Just don't leave." "I'm not them," he said. "I don't know what they've seen, what they're afraid of, but they're here," she replied. "And maybe that's not by chance." Later, he sat on the floor outside their room. The girls were inside, finally asleep. The crib was still in the corner, untouched. He thought of Elena, thought of the baby they never got to meet, thought of the version of himself who used to sing lullabies and argue about paint colors. He wasn't that man anymore. But maybe, just maybe, he was becoming someone else. The next morning, something shifted. He was making oatmeal when he heard soft footsteps. Sophie entered the kitchen holding her bear and a drawing. She placed it on the table and slid it toward him. 2 stick figures, one big, 2 small, all holding hands. Above them a crooked sun, and the word "here" written in shaky, colored letters. David looked at her. "Is that us?" She nodded, eyes still low. "Can I keep it?" he asked. She nodded again, then returned to the hallway, disappearing into the fog of silence. But something had cracked. Not broken, not healed, but cracked just enough for light to seep in. And that was just the beginning. David Monroe had thought the hardest part would be the silence, but he was wrong. The hardest part was everything that came after the silence, the tension that filled the space when words failed, the small, sharp moments that revealed wounds far deeper than he could have imagined. It had been just over a week since Lily and Sophie moved in. Routine had formed, but barely. The girls woke early, dressed themselves in clothes that never quite fit, and sat at the table without speaking. David tried to create comfort pancakes with blueberries, soft music in the background, warm lights instead of cold fluorescence. But comfort is a foreign language to children who have only known uncertainty. The girls never asked for anything. They never ran, never laughed, never cried. And that was the strangest part. They were so still. One evening, David found Lily in the hallway, standing perfectly still, her hands at her sides, staring at the front door. It was late. The lights were low. He asked, "Are you okay?" She didn't move, didn't blink. He stepped closer. Still nothing. Only when he gently placed a hand near her shoulder did she whisper, "I thought I heard her car." "Her who?" he asked. She didn't answer, just turned and walked away. Sophie began humming in her sleep, a soft circular melody, like a lullaby stuck on repeat. It was always the same few notes, always just under her breath. When David mentioned it gently one morning, she froze. "Did I do something wrong?" she asked. "No," he said quickly. "Not at all." It was sweet. She didn't hum again after that. One morning, Lily refused to go to school. She sat on the edge of the bed, dressed, shoes on, arms folded, her jaw tight, her eyes hard. David sat beside her and asked what was wrong. She didn't answer. He waited. After several minutes, she said, "If I go, will they take us?" The question caught him off guard. "Take you where?" "Somewhere else." "No," he said. "Why would they?" "Because that's what happened last time." David felt something twist in his chest. "They won't," he said, more certain than he felt. "You're staying here, both of you. I promise." But he knew promises were fragile things, especially in a system that didn't care about promises. Later that week, the knock came. Two women stood at the door, one in a navy blue blazer, the other with a clipboard. Child Welfare Services. David had expected a follow-up visit. "But not like this. We received a concern," the woman said, "from a school staff member." "About what?" They said the girls are quiet, disconnected, possibly neglected. David's stomach dropped. "Neglected?" He repeated. "They've been here 9 days. We just need to do a routine check. May we come in?" They walked through the house, checked the kitchen, the bedrooms, the bathroom. They spoke to the girls separately. David waited in silence, fists clenched, heart racing. After nearly an hour, they thanked him and left. "Everything seems fine for now," the clipboard woman said, "but we'll be monitoring closely." David stood in the doorway long after they drove off. That night, he didn't eat dinner. He sat at the table while the girls ate quietly. When Sophie reached for the salt and accidentally knocked over her cup of juice, she flinched so hard her chair screeched backward. David stood to help, but she had already grabbed a towel, eyes wide, breathing quick. "I'm not in trouble," she said quickly. "I can clean it. I can fix it." "It's okay," David said softly. "Really." She didn't believe him. He could see it in her eyes. She wiped the spill with trembling hands. And David, he just watched, helpless. After the girls were in bed, he stood in the hallway, looking at their room. A nightlight cast a soft glow on the wall. He could hear their breaths quiet, steady, but tense. He walked back to the living room and sat on the couch, put his head in his hands. And for the first time in 5 years, he cried. Not loud, not broken, just quietly, as if something inside him had finally cracked. He wasn't enough. He didn't know what he was doing. He was failing them. He was failing Alana, too, if she could see him now, trying to be a father, and failing again. The next morning, Sophie didn't come to breakfast. Lily said she had a stomachache. David went to check on her. She was under the blanket, pale, eyes dull. "Do you want me to call a doctor?" he asked. She shook her head. "Do you want to talk?" She didn't answer. He sat on the edge of the bed. "You don't have to be okay right now." Her voice came like a whisper. "I don't like being scared every day." David didn't know what to say, so he didn't say anything. He just stayed. That afternoon, David received a letter. It was official. The state was reviewing the placement. No guarantees, no timelines, just evaluation. He stood in the kitchen, the paper trembling in his hands. Everything he had started to build was now hanging by a thread, and there was nothing he could do to control it. That night, Lily approached him. She held out a folded paper, another drawing. This time, it was just two figures. One tall, one small, both standing in front of a house. Above them, a single word, "Stay." David looked at her. "I want to," he said softly. More than anything, she nodded, then walked away. This moment changed everything. The letter sat unopened on the kitchen counter for 2 days. David Monroe didn't need to read it, not yet. He already knew what it said. More evaluations, more questions, more ways to measure his worth with checklists and legal phrasing. But inside the house, something was shifting. Not loudly, not all at once, but like a cold wind giving way to a quiet sunrise. It started with a laugh. On a rainy Thursday morning, while David was making toast and Lily was reading the cereal box like it was a secret code, Sophie walked into the kitchen wearing a pair of oversized socks that kept slipping off her heels. She tried to walk steadily, but the socks bunched under her toes and sent her stumbling, nearly crashing into the wall. David turned, startled, expecting tears, a flinch, another wave of silence. But instead, Sophie giggled. Then Lily snorted. And for the first time since they arrived, all three laughed. It was brief, fragile, but real. Sophie looked up, surprised by her own sound. Lily blinked, as if unsure whether she was allowed to smile. David leaned on the counter, one hand over his chest, trying to steady the rush of something he hadn't felt in years. Warmth. Later that day, they built a puzzle together, 300 pieces, missing 5. It didn't matter. Sophie insisted the sky was upside down. Lily kept switching edge pieces just to test his patience. David played along. He didn't correct them, didn't over-explain. He simply stayed. And in staying, he gave them something no one else had time without fear. That night, Lily left her door slightly open. It was the first time she hadn't pushed the chair against it before bed. David noticed, but said nothing. Progress wasn't a speech. It was a breath, a pause, a sliver of trust. The next morning, Sophie asked if she could draw on the windows. David raised an eyebrow. "With what?" "Soap and water," she said. "It wipes off." He handed her the materials and watched as she drew flowers, clouds, and something that looked like a rocket ship with wings. Lily joined her silently, drawing smaller shapes in the corners, hearts, stars, a stick figure of a man with 2 girls. David stared at that one longer than he intended. In town, the whispers had started. People who hadn't spoken to David in years began nodding at him in the store. Some offered thin smiles. Others avoided eye contact. He heard someone mutter midlife crisis in line at the pharmacy. He ignored it. He didn't need their approval. He just didn't want their interference. But not everyone stayed silent. One afternoon at the grocery store, a woman from the school board stopped him near the produce aisle. "I heard you took in those girls," she said. Her tone was cautious, not cruel, but skeptical. "I didn't take them in," David said. "They found me." She gave a polite smile. "That's sweet, but you do know how complicated these things can get." He nodded once. "I know," but he didn't elaborate. Some battles don't need explanations, just resilience. That evening, something unexpected happened. While folding laundry, David sneezed loudly, the kind of sneeze that rattled windows. Sophie screamed. She dropped her toy and ran to the bedroom, slamming the door behind her. David followed, heart pounding. He found her curled in the corner, hands over her ears, shaking. "It was just a sneeze," he said gently. But her breathing was erratic, eyes wide with terror. He sat on the floor, not touching her, just close enough to be there. "I would never hurt you," he said softly. "Never. I promise." Her breathing slowed, but she didn't look up. He stayed until she fell asleep right there on the floor. The next morning, Sophie sat beside him during breakfast. Nothing was said, but her chair was closer than usual. And when she left the table, she placed her bear in his lap before walking away. David sat frozen. It wasn't a gift. It was trust. By the end of the week, the house had changed. The hallway no longer echoed. The living room had drawings taped to the walls. The kitchen had 3 mugs instead of 1. And David, without realizing it, had started humming again while cooking a habit he thought had died with Elena. That Friday, Lily asked if they could visit the park. David hesitated. The park was where everything began. But maybe that's why it mattered. They went. It was cloudy, but dry. The bench was still there. The one where he had first seen them, small, soaked, forgotten. They didn't sit. Instead, Sophie climbed the slide. Lily watched squirrels chase each other near the tree line. David sat on the bench, hands in his lap, quietly observing. After a while, Lily approached him. She didn't sit, just stood beside him and said, "Do you remember what I asked the first day?" He nodded. "You asked if we were waiting for someone." She shook her head. "I wasn't waiting. I was listening. For a car. I thought she might come back." David didn't speak. "She never did," Lily said. And for the first time, her voice cracked. David reached out slowly. She didn't flinch. She sat beside him. And in that moment, no paperwork, no courtroom, no letter of choice was made. They weren't just living in the same house. They were becoming a family. The letter arrived on a Tuesday. Unlike the first, this one was sealed in a formal envelope, the kind that meant decisions had been made, not recommendations, not evaluations. Decisions. David Monroe stared at it for a full hour before opening it. He already knew what it meant. Due to procedural delays in the formalization of the care arrangement and concerns raised by external evaluations, Lily and Sophie are to be temporarily transferred to a licensed foster care facility pending court review. Pending court review. David had to read the sentence twice to absorb its full weight. The girls were being taken again. That night, he didn't tell them. He couldn't. He sat at the dinner table while they colored napkins with markers and argued over who drew a better tree. Lily's was tall and realistic. Sophie's had a rainbow trunk. They laughed. David didn't. His smile felt paper thin. He called Claire after they went to bed. "They're taking them," he said. Claire went silent. Then, "David, you need to fight this." "I don't know how." "Yes, you do. I'm not their father. You're more than that now." He stayed up all night researching custody laws, emergency appeals, temporary guardianship loopholes. The computer screen blurred under the weight of legal jargon and hopeless timelines. He was just a man, with no law degree, no allies in the system, no official status. But he had something more powerful than any paper. He had a reason. The next morning, he sat the girls down. They looked at him with eyes that had begun to trust. He nearly broke. "I need to tell you something," he said softly. Lily tensed. Sophie stopped mid-bite. "There's been a decision. They want you to stay somewhere else for a little while, until things are sorted." The silence that followed was unbearable. Sophie blinked. "Are you sending us away?" "No," David said firmly. "I'm not. I would never. But someone else thinks they can decide that for us." Lily stood. "We don't want to go." "I know." Sophie's voice was barely audible. "Is it because I screamed? When you sneezed?" David's heart shattered. No, honey. It's not because of anything you did." She buried her face in her bear. Lily crossed her arms. "If they take us, I'll run away." "You can't do that." "Then don't let them." He looked at her, really looked. She wasn't just a scared child anymore. She was someone fighting for a home. And suddenly, he knew he had no choice. The next 48 hours were a blur. David contacted every local attorney he could find. Most refused. One agreed to a rushed consultation. She listened, reviewed the file, and shook her head. "This isn't about you being unfit," she said. "It's about timing, paperwork, and policy." "Then break the policy." She smiled, sadly. "That's not how it works." He walked out. He didn't stop. He showed up at the county office unannounced. He stood in line, waited, insisted. He spoke to a clerk, then a supervisor, then someone from legal. He told them everything: the park bench, the drawings, the nightmares, the spilled juice, the laughter over socks, the bear in his lap. He wasn't asking. He was demanding. "I don't want to adopt them because I feel sorry for them," he said, voice shaking. "I want to adopt them because they are my family. They've chosen me, and I choose them." Someone finally listened. A petition was filed. He returned home exhausted. The girls were quiet that evening. Too quiet. At bedtime, Lily looked at him. "Do we have to pack?" "No," he said. "Are you sure?" "No," he admitted. "But I'm fighting." She nodded. And then for the first time she walked up to him and hugged him. Not a quick squeeze. A real hug. Tight. Shaky. Then Sophie joined in, her arms around his waist. David closed his eyes. The next morning, the social worker arrived. She had a copy of the court's emergency petition. She looked at David, then at the girls. Then she said the words that felt like breath returning to a drowning man. "They're staying. For now, it wasn't over. There would be hearings, interviews, delays. But for now, they were safe." And for the first time, David didn't feel like a man pretending to be a father. He was one, not by law, but by love. It didn't happen all at once. There was no fireworks moment, no grand revelation, no music swelling in the background. Just quiet mornings, warm cereal, shoes left in the hallway, laughter echoing from a bedroom down the hall, and David Monroe no longer watching his life from the outside. He was living it. The girls stayed. The petition held. The court delayed the final ruling, but the emergency placement stood. The social worker returned weekly, then bi-weekly, always with questions, always with checklists. But with every visit, things got simpler, warmer. David didn't have answers to every form, but he had Sophie's drawings on the fridge, Lily's books stacked beside his chair, and the sound of 2 pairs of feet running through a house that used to echo only silence. He still made mistakes. Once, he forgot to sign Sophie's permission slip, and she missed a field trip. Another time, he packed tuna in Lily's lunch, not knowing it made her gag. He apologized. They forgave him. And that was something new, not being punished for being human. Spring arrived slowly. One morning, David woke up to find the living room windows covered in paper butterflies. Hundreds of them. Cut out, colored, taped carefully. Some had names written on their wings. Others were blank. When he asked about them, Sophie said, "They're for all the homes we never got to stay in, and the one we did." He didn't respond. He just looked at them, all those fragile wings, and felt something heavy in his chest lift. One evening, Lily brought him a book to read aloud. He hesitated at first. It had been years since he'd done that. Since Elena, since the nights they'd imagined reading to their child. His voice cracked on the first page, but the girls didn't mind. Sophie leaned into his side. Lily corrected his pronunciation just to be annoying, and the sound of their laughter filled the space between words. He began sleeping better, dreaming again, not of accidents or empty rooms, but of pancakes, late homework, rainy walks, small, perfect things. He didn't recognize the man in the mirror at first, but little by little, he became someone new. One Saturday, they baked a cake. It was supposed to be chocolate, but they forgot the sugar. They all ate it anyway, laughing at how bitter it was, piling on whipped cream to compensate. "I think we're better at pancakes," Sophie said. "Speak for yourself," Lily added. David just smiled. The girls asked about Elena once. David told them she loved books, always had cold hands, and used to sing off key in the car. "Do you miss her?" Lily asked. "Yes," he said. "Do you think she would have liked us?" Sophie asked. He nodded. "She would have loved you." They didn't press further, but they hugged him that night without asking. By late spring, the court had called for a final review. David prepared, nervous, hopeful, but calm. He had something no paper could prove: a life, a family. Not perfect, not easy, but real. One night, Lily woke him around 2 a.m. There's a storm," she said. Rain pounded the roof. Thunder rolled overhead. Sophie stood behind her, silent, clutching her bear. David got up, pulled out a blanket, and they sat together on the couch. No one spoke. They just sat, warm, close, unafraid. Outside, the storm raged. Inside, they were safe. And in that moment, David realized he hadn't saved them. They had saved him. "Dear David, I know you won't believe this right now. Not while you're staring at a hospital bed with empty hands. Not while the silence of your house feels louder than any storm. But listen anyway. You're going to be okay. Not tomorrow. Not next month. Maybe not even next year. But one day, when you least expect it, life is going to hand you something fragile and ask you to carry it. And this time, you won't drop it. You'll think your story ended in that accident. That what made you a husband or a soon-to-be father was buried with the people you loved most. But it didn't end there. You didn't end there. Grief will hollow you out, yes. It will leave you half present in diners, half asleep in your own skin. You'll forget what joy feels like. You'll forget what you sound like when you laugh. But not forever. One day, 2 small girls will appear in your life, not planned, not explained, just there. And for reasons you won't understand at first, you won't walk away. Even though you'll want to. Even though everything in you will say, "You're not strong enough for this." But here's the truth: you are. Not because you're perfect. Not because you're brave. But because pain, when it doesn't destroy you, has a strange way of preparing you. You'll see things in them: fear without words, silence that screams. And you'll recognize it because you've lived it too. And without realizing it, your healing will begin the moment you try to help them heal. You'll fail a lot. Burn the pancakes. Say the wrong thing. Forget to breathe sometimes. But they won't need you to be perfect. Just present. You'll start to laugh again. The first time will surprise you. You'll hear footsteps that don't haunt. You'll tuck in blankets that used to sit untouched. You'll hold tiny hands that tremble at first. Then learn to hold back. And one day, they'll call you something. Maybe not Dad, not yet, but something better safe. And on a night when thunder shakes the sky and 2 little bodies curl up next to you on the couch, you'll realize this isn't a second chance. This is your real life, and you didn't miss it. You just took the long road here. So breathe, David. Let the grief run its course. Because waiting on the other side isn't just healing. It's purpose. It's family. It's love, the kind that doesn't ask for permission to arrive. And when it does, don't hesitate. Stay. Always you. David's story isn't just about adoption. It's about courage. About opening your heart when every part of you has already shut down. Maybe you won't find 2 little girls on a park bench. But one day, you'll face a moment just as important. A choice to keep hiding or to let yourself begin again. And when that moment comes, I hope you have the strength to stay. Because sometimes, loving again isn't the end of the pain. It's the beginning of healing. If this story moved you, share it. Someone out there might be waiting for this message without even knowing it.